Um, Today we are going to be talking to Dr. Keisha Bean. I'm very excited about that. She actually is a therapist. She specializes in anxiety, depression, and family conflicts, internal family conflicts. So I feel like it's going to be an amazing conversation. I'm so excited that she is joining us. I'm going to let her in just a minute. I'm not sure how many people are going to join this live, but I'm really excited about this one because she is an actual therapist that has experience with blended families, family conflict, and that is what I started my YouTube journey talking about my history with that. The history of my family and all of that. So I'm really excited to get a professional on the channel to give us a little bit of her expertise and, just any wisdom that is helpful, needed, necessary, and I really feel like we're going to get that from Dr. Bean. So I'm excited to have her. And now let me figure out how to add her in. Okay. I think I pushed this button. One second. Let's see. Hopefully this works out. Remember Grace, everyone. Hello, Dr.
Hello,
Bean.
hello. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing great, actually. I'm doing great. Little
Good.
rain, but I'm doing fine.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's been raining all day. I'm in Spring Hill, so we've
Okay.
gotten nothing but rain. So yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah.
It's been like that for the past like 3 days, so great.
Yes, but I'm excited to be here, so this helps. I'm really excited
Yay!
to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my little channel. I really appreciate it.
No
I did a
problem.
little introduction to everyone watching, but if you would like to take a few minutes to introduce yourself, tell us about your background, so we can, get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, well, yeah, my name is Keisha Bean I'm very informal, but yes, Dr. Keisha Bean, just to be more formal. I am a
Yeah.
psychologist. I have a private practice, and in my private practice, I see a lot of couples,
Okay.
individuals, of course. I see men and women, adolescents. I see members of the LGBTQ plus community. Um, the only
Nice.
the only clients I really don't work with is like younger children, so maybe
Okay.
12 and under. But I have people on my team who do. But I do prefer to work with my adolescents and up. I do work with skilled nursing home facilities. Sometimes people
Oh,
who can't
cool.
leave for mental health support, but they need it, especially in nursing home facilities. So I take therapy to
Yeah.
them. And
Oh,
I have some
wow.
years, yeah, and I have some years experience with correction. So I do a lot of stuff with boundaries. And if anything is going to help solidify boundaries and boundaries training, then work in correction. So I did that for several years. Sorry, it was a little
Wow.
mad.
Nice.
Yeah,
Oh no, that's awesome. So you've been doing
yeah,
this for
yeah.
like 15 years?
20, yeah, almost 20,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
for a
Okay,
while.
so you've got all the experience.
Yes, it's been about 20 years roughly if you don't count all that. When you're working on your doctorate and getting licensed, you have so many years experience you have to do
Yeah.
before you actually officially can call yourself a psychologist. So if you don't even count just getting licensed, a lot of
Wow.
experience even prior to that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that is awesome. And you do specialize in internal family conflicts, correct?
Yes, internal family. I work with families, quite a few
Okay.
families in my private practice. And what's interesting, I work with families of all ages. Sometimes people think families as adults and younger children,
Hmm.
but I work with adult children
Right.
and older adults with older adults. It's a range. So yes,
Oh
absolutely.
wow. Okay. Well, I love that. It makes me feel good that to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one
Right.
who
No,
could
no,
benefit from
not at all.
family therapy.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I do have some questions prepared, and I guess we can just kind of like jump into it and just see
Okay.
how everything flows. So, my first
Okay.
question is, can you provide some do's and don'ts and considerations for creating healthy approaches to blended families for adults?
Yes, healthy approach. Well, there's a few things, and I guess, I want to be clear, but I guess I should also preface it with I do think a lot of things that impact blended families and those dynamics really
Yeah.
are also impacted before the family even becomes blended. So I would say
Oh, wow,
one
okay.
thing is really assessing how your relationship with that parent or with your child before you come across, a blended family situation. And I
Yeah.
say that to say usually the better and stronger and healthier those relationships are separately, then they
Mhm.
tend to be a little more fluid. Not always, but tend to be a little more fluid. So I would say
Okay.
first prefacing it with that, assessing your relationship prior to the blended family. Two, and I know this sounds so uh, cliche or something people say all the time, but communication. It really is about communication. I've worked with family systems where there may be a blended family situation and someone is seeing somebody or they decide to get married and they wait to that time to say, hey, guess what? And there's been no, I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds funny, like people, but it's so true. And a lot of times I think when the children in those situations, I don't think it's always that they have a problem or an issue per se. I think it's just like, oh, you know, well, my issue is not the person.
Right.
My issue is that you didn't even bother to make it seem like my voice mattered in
Okay,
this.
I love
And
that.
you have some adults who feel like, well, my children's voice don't matter. What I want is what I want. But
Yeah.
you can say that, but that communication ahead of time and just, asking for input or thoughts, it can go a long way. So I do
Yeah.
think the communication. And then I think the other piece is tips is being open to include everybody in some of the
Okay.
conversations, not always have these separate. You need the separate
Ooh,
ones, but
okay.
also bring everybody to the table. Say, hey, is there an energy? How's this feeling? How's this?
Yeah.
And I just think that that's really important as well.
Do you feel like that would be like the proper approach to it? Like to instead of just kind of coming in all at once and having the entire family kind of separating everything, picking it apart and maybe working on two members at a time or something like that?
Think that's the best approach because, of course, we already know it's going to vary. And age is a big part of this. Little children don't tend to have as
Right.
many challenges with blended families than older children, teenagers. When I'm saying older,
Yeah.
teenager children in the home
Yeah.
versus children. Are children in the home? Are they out the home? How often are they out the home versus the child that's in the home a lot? And then all of a sudden, there's this other person in the picture. I think those dynamics matter.
Right.
But I do I'm just going to take a hypothetical.
Okay.
I have two children. Okay, so let's say if I'm going to marry somebody
Hmm.
or want to bring somebody in my life, and we haven't even gotten to do they have children?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, in fact, but let's say right now they don't. Just bringing somebody into the picture. I would like to think that I will have a conversation with my
Right.
everything's going great, then fine. You and I don't even have a conversation about this right now, right?
Right.
But in situations where it typically doesn't go great, then yes, we have to talk about that individually and collectively
Okay.
along the way. I just think, but you have to kind of gauge it. It depends on a
Yeah.
lot of dynamics there. I've seen in a few situations where, again, people do all that. They do the conversations, they talk to each other, they're doing activities together, but
Hmm.
they forget that, again, I'm gonna go back to an example. I have a daughter and a son. Let's say my daughter's older, so let's use her.
Okay.
If I'm going to start bringing somebody into my home or we bring our lives together and now we
Hmm.
have this blended family, it's
Right.
still going to be important for me to do stuff with her.
Individually
Sometimes
with her. Yeah.
sometimes families come together, and that may not be always, but typically what happens,
Hmm.
we're getting used to each other's presence and what that means, and
Right.
it's a lot that comes with it, and we kind of forget to still invest individually into that child and
Ooh.
just nurture that relationship. And I
Yeah.
find that when that happens, when you can pour into that relationship a little more, then it makes that transition for that person I'm bringing to my life, it actually makes it easier for them too. Because some of
Yeah.
this stuff is not really about them, but it impacts them.
Okay. I completely understand because for me with my situation, I was introduced to my stepmother when I was like 2 or 3. So for me, she had always been
Right.
in my life. There was no
Yeah.
introduction pretty much needed because she came into my life as a young child. But
Mhm.
she also had her own child as well. So
Mhm,
if when you just kind of touched on it, when someone else has a kid, then you're adding a whole nother dynamic to the situation. It's not just
mhm,
a parent introducing the child, it's two parents and two different kids all kind of coming together. And it can be a recipe for disaster if it's not done correctly, I feel like.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And I think just like couples, let me just take a quick example when I work with just couples, just
Yeah.
that have a child together. Let's say a couple gets married and they have a child together, right?
Right.
It's even a challenge for them to focus on each other as a couple because when the
Mm,
child comes along, every thing the
everything's
relationship
about the
solely
kid.
focus about the kid. So
Mhm.
imagine, just like with your example, when you're talking about two different people, they have their own children, but then they're coming up under this one roof and trying
Right.
to navigate all these dynamics. You can imagine somebody sometimes loses individual attention.
Right, right. So what do you feel like some mistakes that some step parents typically make, I guess, when you're starting to blend your family? What are some common mistakes that you see?
That the step parent makes, the person who, yeah, is
Yes. Yes.
I think a couple of things I've seen, step parents sometimes make too many assumptions. We just
Okay.
assume this is going to be simple. Going to assume that they're going to like me. I'm great. Why wouldn't they love me?
Yeah.
Assume sometimes that conversations have been had that you don't know for sure have been had if you have not asked.
Right,
Um,
right.
I think sometimes they make the mistake of trying too hard. This is going to be interesting
Trying
what I
to
say. I'm about to almost it sound like contradict myself, but I do think in some situations I've seen,
they come in too hot. Yeah.
I think that also comes with assumptions though. And I think sometimes that can come from a very well-intentioned
Mm,
place. But when you're on the receiving end as the child, it's
it's a
like,
lot.
whoa, it just feels like you're kind of doing the most.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I do feel like there are those situations, I've seen this too, where you have some step parents that don't do enough. Now, that may have more to do with
Okay.
being comfortable in conversations that the couple may not have had, but don't do enough, don't lean in enough, don't be present
Mm,
enough. So then they come off kind of standoffish. They can come
okay.
off kind of cold. They can come off as they're in this space, but you're not really present with me. And
Right.
sometimes I've heard the intention behind that is like, oh, well, that's their child. I don't want to, yeah, we're a family, but
Yeah.
I want to. And sometimes children really do want you to lean into them. We just gotta be
Yeah.
mindful of how we're leaning. Kids like attention, we like attention,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of how you lean into them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because I do feel like that is a very delicate situation kind of come into. If
Yeah.
you are the step parent, coming in, are there signs? Do you feel like that when you are starting to introduce, the blended family aspect in your relationship, are there signs that you can touch on that are like, oh, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe this person I'm with is not someone who would be suited to be a step parent, and how you would go about kind of navigating that. Yeah. Right, right. Mhm. Mm. Yeah.
Parents, do they spend time with their child? How do they talk through their
Yeah.
frustrations about their children? There are things you should be picking up along the way long before that happens. But let's take the next stage of it. Your children are now in the picture. You haven't come together as a
Mhm.
family yet, but you're starting to introduce them. You want them to get to know them because this is the
Right.
person you've decided is your person.
Right.
Then how do they interact? How do they? And yes, that's kind of a time where people don't just jump in and all of a sudden, try to be
Yeah.
buddy with your kids, but you can pick up on things if they start to spend enough time together. And then even
Mm,
after they've spent time, what do they say after
mm.
when you ask them hypotheticals like, oh, well, little John, when he was running around the living room, oh, I thought I was going
Okay.
to lose it. What do they say in response
Right,
to that?
right,
How do they talk through these things? So that is something I would like to think long before you decide to actually bring your families together. If you're having a question about
right.
that, some things should have been discussed way before that time. I like to think.
I think there's a lot of people, I just with some people that I know and having conversations around this topic. I feel like there are people out there that may not know the signs, what to look for. Like what type of
Mhm.
response is something that is like, I wonder if that's a red flag. What type of interaction when is like, is that a red flag? You know what I mean?
I do. And I think what I would say to that is, there are a few things that are automatic major red flags.
Yeah.
The majority of things that we do in life and, when we're dating or meet people may be yellow flags. And
Yellow flags. Okay.
yellow flags is something that you kind of bookmark, like, oh, let me see where this goes. And then you get a little more information, like, ah, okay, you know what, that makes sense. Okay, I'll put
Right.
that back to green. I'm good.
Yeah.
Or you might say, ah, yeah, no. And that might
Hmm.
then go to red. So I think when you say anything blatant like abuse or really
Right.
aggressive or harsh,
Right.
then it's like, okay, that's a red flag. That's not cool. One might also argue, though, that somebody might, I mean, if we're not talking about physical aggression, raise a voice or something, you kind of talk through it and get a little more
Yeah.
insight. That might not be an ongoing thing. We don't know. You have to say
Right.
that could have been a bad day. That could have been a moment of redirection. Like, hey, well, I don't really, that's not how we talk to kids, my kids. And that's not how I like to talk to my kids. Can we talk about it? And if they're receptive to feedback and you actually see that,
Yeah.
knows, is some of that
Okay.
is a case by case, but I do think anything that remotely seems like a yellow flag, you have to talk about it and see what you do with it. Does it go to green? We might be
Okay.
good for now, or no, this is a sign of a bigger issue. If you if
Okay.
you if you plan on marrying or being with somebody and have a blended family and you realize that the time you spend together, they never really interact with your kids, they never even volunteer to take your kids anywhere. Hey,
Mhm.
I'll do things or pick them up for you, depending on how close you are.
Right.
But you want somebody really involved, and that's showing you that they're
That's not
not
the person.
eh, right. What do you do
Yeah.
with
Right.
it's really up to you. And I think sometimes people are aware, but then now we're talking about how much do you prioritize wanting the relationship over wanting kind of some of these other things. Yeah.
Yeah, the appropriate partner that benefits not just
Mhm.
you, but your child as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
But I have had a lot of conversations with different people around that and trying to identify those yellow flags and figure out how
Mhm.
to navigate that, how to move forward, or if you should even move forward. Just because I'm not the only person that has a blended family. It's a very
Mhm.
common thing, especially amongst millennials, my generation, to
Yeah.
have to come from a blended family. So trying to kind of, I guess, break that, the negativity, the toxicity that can come with it if it's not handled appropriately, to know what signs to look for, to know what type of person, and character traits you want in a partner, so that if you do find yourself in a situation where you have to blend your family, you have the right partner, because it does make a
Mhm.
huge difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think my experience, I have very rarely been in a situation, and it happens. I've very rarely been in a situation, whether this is couples, whether it's blended families,
Hmm.
where a problem hasn't occurred, where once you start talking through the problem in therapy, there was already an awareness that there was a problem long ago.
Mm,
In other words, people will usually acknowledge that, yeah, I saw this, but yeah, this did come up, but you hear these buts.
yeah.
Very rarely, not that it doesn't happen, do I hear people say, it's just not the majority of the time do people say, you know what, this just came out of left field. I just
Yeah.
had no clue.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
tells me that there are things coming up. It's not that when you ask the question, what do you do with that or what to look for? A lot of times people see, people know, people have an awareness. I think it's just a matter of what do they choose to do with it. And I think if
Okay.
you're very clear about your goals and what you want and what you need, then it's an easier decision to make than not.
Okay. Okay, I love that. I love that. And I'm looking at my next question. When it comes to a blended family, how important is co-parenting with a parent that which parent is not in the house? So if you have a co-parenting situation and you're about to blend your family, how important is that co-parenting situation?
Well, I think the co-parenting situation is very important. I think it's reasonable to assume or to acknowledge that if, as a co-parent, you all get along fine, you respect each other's boundaries, and it's a healthy relationship, and you both are focused on the best interest of the child, then that's going
Yeah.
to be easier for your new relationship in the blended family. I do know of situations, though, where the person who has the co-parenting situation but now is in a blended family,
Mm-hmm.
they are just really good at setting boundaries. And so if the co-parenting
Mm,
situation is not great, they really are the gatekeeper of how that is going to impact their relationship. So they're very intentional.
mm,
Situations that I've seen that are still healthy and very good are just
yeah.
relationships where they say, no, this is not going to be, if I'm with somebody, no, this is not about to be a problem for you. I got it. I have this boundary in place. This does not have to really impact our relationship. That
Okay.
can get kind of tricky sometimes because there's a lot of stress that comes with chaotic co-parenting situations, especially when
Yeah.
children are involved. So I think it's reasonable to know and assume that the healthier it is, great. But if it's not, I think that person is
Setting
really
the
about how
appropriate
they manage
boundaries.
it and how they set the boundaries and the
Yeah.
support they have from their blended relationship within that.
Okay, okay, because it does really have an effect and does play a part in, I guess, maybe, or does it, with the success of a blended family if a co-parenting situation is negative or toxic, or they're not and as involved as they should be. That could definitely impact the blended family, correct?
Well, I would say this, it can impact the blended family if the family lets it. I mean,
Okay.
that's just my response to that is that, again, I'm just going to use if you're in a relationship, if I'm in a relationship, it
Hmm.
is my responsibility, my relationship responsibility, my partner's responsibility to make sure
Right.
things don't negatively impact us. We are the gatekeepers of our relationship. And that just doesn't
Okay.
go that doesn't go, and this is my philosophy and my approach and what I practice. That doesn't just go for co-parenting. That goes for parents. I mean, a
Okay.
couple can't let their parents cause stress and
Right.
dynamics in relationship. They can't let sisters and in-laws and I was, you once you're in a
Yeah.
relationship and you're saying this is us, we are the gatekeepers to protect our relationship. We are here for each other. So you
Okay.
definitely don't let an ex,
Okay.
impact your or past relationship impact your current relationship, but that's up to the couple.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't know if there was any, I guess, significance around, even though you have your family, it's a blended family. If you don't have a positive relationship with the co-parent that's outside, how that could affect the child in the home with the blended family, how that could affect how the child responds to that step parent in the home with the blended family. Just making sure that if there is positivity in that relationship, that it kind of flows down to the children and does not disrupt that household.
Yeah, you know what? It can. I mean, that's just the
Oh,
honest
okay.
answer. It can.
Okay.
However, I will still say that because now when you're talking about the unhealthy relationship or if the co-parents don't get along, what you mentioned
Hmm.
just now was how does that play out through the child? So if
Hmm.
the child is hearing negative stuff when they're with the other parent and bashing and negative talk or trying to
Right.
pit kids, play the children against each other,
Pit them
that
against,
can
yeah.
become a that can become an issue. I think again, that is about though your relationship with your child. And I like to think the more resilient, the more connected you are, rather, with your own
Okay.
child, the more resilient it is to that. Believe it. Children know, and we're talking about age differences, depends, but
Right.
children know their parents. They
Right.
know who they are. They know what they're capable of and kind of at pretty young ages. So
Yeah.
if all of a
Yeah.
sudden there's a parent saying, "Oh, your mom is this, your mom is that," and so or the mom is saying, "Your dad, he's no good. He never wants to." It is really about your relationship you've established with your child, and in hopes that that will be resilient to whatever impact those negative conversations would have.
Okay. Okay, I like that. So do you feel like timing matters when introducing children to a new partner for a blended family?
Um, I think timing definitely matters from a standpoint of, I just think if you have, I mean, if you don't have any children, it's just the two of you, two people, one might say, okay, well, you can meet somebody,
Yes.
want to get married in a month, 30 days, fine, go
Yeah.
for it, whatever.
Go ahead, do it.
And somebody might still say, well, you still should get to know them. Hey, do you live your best life?
Yeah.
However, I
Yeah.
think when children are involved, you are assessing your relationship with the person. You
Right.
want to have an understanding of their potential to be a good parent to your children or parental figure to your children. And you
Right.
also want to have a good idea of how you all team together to even juggle all the things that come with having kids and blended families. And so to me, that naturally takes time. How much time? I don't know. It varies.
Yeah.
But I do think you have to take time for your relationship first. Just that
Okay.
first. Forget introducing kids. I'm not really a big fan of introducing kids early, but to each its own. Get to know that person for you first, but whatever
Mhm.
timeline that is that you feel comfortable. When you feel like you have a good feel of that, then fine. If you want to bring the kids into the picture, but even give that time because it takes a minute to really see what that looks like. And you have to understand with a
Mhm.
lot of blended families, unless somebody has sole custody, you know, a lot of times the child is not around as often. You might have every other weekends and stuff. So sometimes it takes a little longer to really see what that looks like,
Right.
unless there's situations the child's just with you on a
Okay.
regular basis.
Okay.
So
So
I'm just going to
do you feel
say
like
time
maybe
without.
a couple months, couple weeks? When do you feel like would be a good time to kind of introduce the children into that?
You mean how long should a couple date before they introduce their children?
Yes.
That's a tough one. I really,
If
I'll
you're a
be honest.
couple and you plan on going like the long haul, you're gonna get married.
Let
Like when
me
do you feel like that next step should happen?
Let me give you this without, because you're locking me in, but that's okay. I said, I'm fine with that because I think I get it.
Yeah.
I will say, and I feel comfortable saying a minimum, and I'm just saying this loosely because it can vary. I say a
Right.
minimum of 6 months. I say in a
Okay. Six
relationship for a
months.
minimum, just do you for 6 months, just do you
Right.
for the thing that people don't realize about relationships are always good in the beginning, typically.
Yeah.
Relationships are easy when
Honey,
you're in
yeah.
love and it's fun. We're going out to eat, we're spending time together, we're laying up under each other. It's
Right.
wonderful then. The true test of a relationship often is, what does that relationship look like when you have to go through something together? What do your arguments
Mhm.
look like? It's okay to argue, it's okay to disagree. People want to shy away from that. I'm
Right.
concerned about, how do you argue
Is it healthy?
how does your person respond to stress when they've had a bad day at work? Do they shut you out? Do they get cold? Do they get mean when they're stressed? And these are things that sometimes you can't see until you've really spent a little time together. So I'm going to
Right.
say 6 months, but honestly, that can even vary. That really can vary.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because that is a very another delicate situation with the kids because it could go left real quick if you do it too early. So
Mhm.
6 months, I feel like that's a good time.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
I like what you said with that. Let's see. Can you describe what healthy looks like in blended families?
what healthy looks like in blended
Yes.
families.
Yes, what a
You know
healthy
what?
blended family looks
That
like.
That's easy. I would say a healthy blended family looks like a healthy family. It looks like
Okay.
we can disagree, we can have arguments, but how do we argue? How do we communicate? Healthy blended families looks like when there's some, just like I would do in my own family, is
Right.
if we having a challenge in the home, if chores aren't getting done, somebody needs to step up, the kids' room is dirty. Hey, let's have a
Right.
town meeting. Let's have a town meeting. Let's come together. Let's talk, and we
Mhm.
both get to, as team us in this blended family, we both get to co-facilitate, but the children also get to have input as well. A sign of a
Okay.
healthy family is that even when things get bad or frustrating or have difficult times, how safe do the children feel coming to either person
Okay.
in the
Okay.
home? Because I do know of some situations that are blended families where the children have felt more comfortable going to the spouse, the step parent,
Yep. Yeah.
than easy. It's because people bring different things and that's okay. I don't
Right.
think that's necessarily a bad thing. Can they come to either of you within this system that we're raising children or trying to,
Right.
take care of these children together? So I think that's what a healthy family looks like.
Okay. Okay, so let's if you mind, let's switch gears and kind of like talk about
Yeah.
my blended family.
Mhm.
I no longer consider them family. We've had this conversation. I no longer consider them family. But with my situation, I kind of grew up with my paternal family. They had always been in my life, always been a part. But as we got older, I felt like the parents, I guess, did not prioritize the kids. They didn't prioritize the marriage. They didn't prioritize just pretty much what mattered when it came to keeping the family together, keeping the family like informed. Communication was lacked and everything. Do you feel like in situations like mine, is there a way to kind of turn that around?
Okay. You mean turn it around from what's already happened? Like as
Yeah,
far as
so
what
when
didn't
you
happen?
if you've had a somewhat decent cohesive blended family and as time has gone on it's kind of deteriorated. Like what would be some tools and steps to take to kind of get that to a copacetic place?
Well, I think a big piece of this goes back to communication. There are some things that, when someone says, well, can this turn around? I think it depends on how deep some of these things are. There's some stuff sometimes that happens that emotionally we just kind of hold on to, or it's caused a certain amount of damage, or it's sat so long
Hmm.
with us that it's taken root. I
Right.
think that it really matters on the timing of those things and how when somebody tries to come and process and talk through what has happened, because you have to be able
Hmm.
to own what happened. So
Right,
when you say, can
accountability
that
is
be,
big.
you have to be able to own it. So is
Yeah.
that happening? Because you can't really say, try to make something better, but you don't really own what caused the damage. And so if
Right.
the capability is there, and if again, apologies don't really mean much without change in behavior.
Right.
So if an apology is going to be included in this accountability, then what looks different? So
Okay.
if there's no accountability, and then if there is an apologies or apology is some type of ownership, but then things are still looking the same, behaviors are still the same, then it's not really much to that's going to look different. It's not going to be much to
Right.
undo it. But I do think if accountability is there and sincere apologies that are colored by actions, different
Right.
actions, and an ownership of that, then yeah, I think that if the person's open to it turning around, I absolutely think it can.
Okay. All right. So then devil's advocate, if it's, like I said, coming from a pretty decent blended family, something happens, relationships kind of deteriorate, and someone does not want to kind of bring the family back together. Someone does not want to be a part of the blended family because of treatment, because of involvement or lack thereof. Do you feel like that is also okay? Do you feel like it is okay to if you come from a blended family to just be like, you know what, maybe this family is not for me. Maybe I should move on.
Well, let me say this. If you're asking me, do I feel like that's if that's okay? I'm going to always say, well, yeah, initially. I'm going to say that's okay if that's all the information I have.
Right.
Because how I instantly take that is somebody has set a boundary for themselves. Somebody has determined something is too painful, something's too difficult, something
Right.
I can't manage this, something is impacting me and hurting me, or in such a way that I have to set a boundary for myself. And if that boundary is distance, if that boundary is some type of just kind of shifting gears in this relationship, then that's what I need to do. And I'm always going to be for people to do what they need to do to take care and protect themselves. Right.
Okay.
So outside of that, I would say that the rest of it, and I know this sounds so broad, it really just depends because it depends on um, has this is this a new thing, and people do drop the ball and make mistakes, and they say things and stuff, and are you willing to give them some allowance, some grace, some opportunity to remedy it, to
Right.
fix it? Is that even an option, or is this a pattern of behavior? Because patterns of
Okay.
behavior are different. If this is a pattern of behavior, then you know what you need to know because
Right.
you can't change the pattern behavior. The person with the pattern has to
Has to
adjust their
change.
pattern of behavior. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably the best way I can answer that for now.
I know, yeah, it was a very vague question. I tried to put
No,
it pretty vague, but also apply it to my situation because my situation is
yeah,
not everyone's situation.
yeah,
Um, and as I told you, like, with the family that I had, putting me out in the public and kind of doing what they did after years of trying to repair a relationship, I
mhm,
made the tough decision and the hard decision that, hey, this doesn't bring value to my life. I do not benefit from this relationship, neither does my family, my children. So I've decided to cut ties. And I've gotten a lot of pushback
mhm,
from some people, in the world of the internet, of like, that's not okay. Never say never. Family is family, blood is blood. So that's why I kind of phrase the question that way because
mhm,
I like when you say boundaries are important. I like when you
mhm.
say it's up to that person with their patterns, their behavior, if they're willing to change, even if grace, even if, forgiveness is given, if they're still going to be who they are and they are not going to bring value, they are not going to benefit you in your life, it is okay to cut
Mhm.
ties.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big person on boundaries. I'm a big person on true self-care. And I try to convey to people self-care is not always about going to the spa or getting your nails done. Self-care is about mentally how does something impact you and being able to set a
Right.
boundary and keeping things from impacting you in a negative way. And one thing I will say about family, I don't know. I've never really believed that you keep family around just because they're family. I do believe
Right.
there's a good
Wow.
component, but because there's still people, and the reality is, family because of their role in your life. I'm very close to my family. So, but I'm also aware
Yeah.
that because of that, my family can hurt me the most. And so if you're in a situation where you're constantly getting hurt by people can hurt you the most, then what do you do? Do you just take it in the name of family? Do you just sit and
Right.
some people have a higher tolerance and threshold. I've seen some very unhealthy dealing with depression and anxiety in the name of family. And so
Mhm.
again, to each its own. But I am a big person about boundaries. I do believe family the name of family or in the name of family gives you um, a few more opportunities to get it right.
Yeah.
Whereas a friend may do something, be like, you know what, this friendship's not for me, or a coworker may
Yeah.
make
I'm
you mad.
out.
I'm not gonna talk to them
Yeah.
again. But your family, I do believe, okay, I'll give you, barring safety
Right.
issues,
Right.
or the situations, that we don't have to get. But yeah, barring that, I do believe it may get you a few more opportunities to get it right. Like, okay, you didn't quite make the mark on that. You didn't quite hit the target on that. But let me communicate again. Let me tell you what my needs are again. Let me give you a few more opportunities to get it right. And
Right.
if you just can't get it right, then now I get to make a decision with the information I've been provided, with the experience I'm having. Because I have to sit
Right.
with that experience. So people may write you and say, "Oh, should never say never." It's like, okay, well, you don't have to say it, but at the same time, you still get to move in a way that takes care of you until that maybe opportunity changes. And if somebody comes to you and says something different and you're open to it, then great. But
Right.
me, you absolutely currently, they take it day by day, and you totally get to set whatever boundary you need to set for yourself.
Okay, I love that. And within setting those boundaries, so if someone, made the hard decision like I did to break away from a family,
Mhm,
especially a blended family, if it was not a positive situation,
mhm.
in order to like break that cycle and then cut them off, um, what do you feel like the, I guess, I don't want to say the future issues, but what could arise, I guess, in the future? Do you feel like could be something to navigate once you decide to make that hard decision to no longer be close with the family anymore?
Well, let me ask you this question. When you say you're saying the blended family together, which
Hmm.
obviously would be a parent, your parent, it'll be, if I'm and the person
Yeah,
that they're with. That's the whole blended family. So when you say
right,
that, you're saying if you don't have anything to do with any of them
right.
anymore, what impact that could have?
Yeah, what could that have in the long run for someone if you decide to make that hard decision to cut that family off?
I think the impact it would have is relative to how you've grieved and taken care of yourself through the grieving of that process. Because I have to assume reasonably, and I don't make assumptions, but I'm gonna use the word assumption for tonight. I have to assume that that's not an easy decision to make,
Right,
and it's still a loss. It's a loss of a relationship, and keep in mind that biological parent is a loss of that relationship.
right,
So I think the impact is relative to the grief. If a person is honest with them, sometimes we just want to say, "I'll forget it. I don't like them. I want anything else to do with them." And we act like it's not a big deal. I think we get to own, no, this is a big deal. This is a big decision. And that's
right,
okay. And yes, I can know that this is best for me, but still grieve grieve the ideal that I thought it was going to be, grieve what I wish it was, grieve what I was hoping for it to be. I get to grieve that because that's no longer the case. And so if
right,
you truly are honest with yourself and take care of yourself throughout that process and work yourself through, not get over it, work
right.
yourself through that grieving process, then I don't really anticipate many adverse
Effe
impacts, you
Okay,
know?
okay. I like
Yeah.
that. And then how do you feel like would be the best way to kinda go about that grief process? Because I did try and explain to people for me, um, that with me deciding that I will no longer be a part or involved with a family,
Mhm.
that is a loss for me. That is a piece of my
Mhm.
heart that is gone. It
Mhm.
is a process. It is something that I have to work through, maybe not every day, maybe not every week, but when that family crosses my mind, that is something that I
Yeah.
have to actively put myself in a positive headspace of forgiveness, of moving forward, and being okay with, the grief that I have with that relationship dying. So how do you feel like, what is the best way to kind of go through that grieving process to make sure you're doing it properly? And that I guess you don't have anything lingering. Yeah, just doing it properly so there's nothing lingering, so you're not triggered by something in the future, that you're just properly processing out that emotion.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind that you can work through something and still be triggered by something. I think
Mm,
a sign of whether or not you're in a healthier place of your process has to do maybe more with how frequently you're triggered, how intensely you're triggered, but you get to
mm,
be triggered by something time to time. That's how the unconscious and subconscious work, and you can actually be in a
okay.
very healthy place. I mean, and then all of a sudden a sound or somebody's voice or something be like, okay, and then all of a sudden you're in a mood.
Yeah.
But how readily do you work through that mood? How self-aware you are about what that is, and then how
Right.
readily you can kind of bounce back from it, then that still could be very healthy. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily held back or stuck in a place. I
Okay.
do think when you talk about the signs or what to look for, I think it starts with honesty. I think it's a matter
Mm,
of not being in denial. Sometimes we're so focused on trying to be strong and resilient or whatever that means, or, they've hurt me, so forget them, that we don't want
right.
to acknowledge that, but I'm hurt by the loss of it. I think part of it is acknowledging the
Mm,
hurt. You get to hurt. You get to, and
right.
sometimes that's hard because that means being vulnerable and acknowledging it, but being vulnerable with yourself.
Yeah.
It's like you get to be vulnerable and honest with yourself. So I think that's where it starts. I do feel like a big piece of knowing if you're working through something in a healthy manner is people around you. How do they experience you? And how do you
Right.
sit with yourself on the day to day? We know when we're a little more irritated. We know we're a
Right.
little more cranky. We know when we're not sleeping. We know when we're a little more
Yeah.
anxious. These things. Your feelings will. One thing I tell people: your feelings will never lie to you.
Right.
We lie to ourselves about what our feelings mean. But your feelings would
Yes.
the feelings the most
Yeah.
genuine thing you would have. We don't make up our feelings like, "Oh,
Right.
I'm mad today," you know? You're
Yeah.
upset, you're angry, you're hurt, you're disappointed because that's what you're feeling. So I just think being honest with that, and if you find that you're not able to truly navigate that yourself, go to a therapist, get a therapist, talk to somebody who's skilled, there's a lot of different therapists out there. Talk to somebody who's skilled, in that work and in family systems or
Yeah.
in grief work. A lot of models of grief work can apply to a lot of different things. And then let them work with you and let them kind of help gauge that for you.
I love that. Do you feel like when it comes to, I guess, blended families and situations like these, therapy is not just, something good to do, but kind of necessary? Like it is an actual need for the success of the blending of the family or the breaking away of a family. Do you feel like therapy is necessary in those moments?
I think the therapy is a very helpful and critical component with anything that's causing some type of distress in a
Okay.
person's life. And as we said before, family, when I'm working with people in my practice, family is oftentimes a big source. It may not be blended family, sometimes it's just relationship,
Just
children,
family. Yeah.
but family, period, is usually a huge source of stress and anxiety and depression and all the things that
Mm,
come with self esteem. A lot of our self esteem
wow.
is impacted by our family and what they say or what they say we're going to be or not going to be or what we should or shouldn't do. It's just a lot of variables there. So I will say that. If you're in a situation where there's a lot of distress or frustration or chaos, and particularly in this subject matter, blended families, then absolutely. And the good thing about that for blended families that's having stress and chaos, but they're together still, a
Hmm.
therapist, family therapy is great for that. It can
Yeah.
get a little wild sometimes, but the
Yeah.
outcome, that's just part of it
Okay.
until you get to where I've seen some beautiful things come out of family therapy with families that were having some um, challenges.
Okay. Is there a
Mhm.
correlation to the amount of time spent in therapy to navigate those issues? Is there like a correlation with uh, having one session? That's great, but that's a start. This is something that you will need to have continuous, help with, or not, forever, but you might need
Yeah.
4 sessions or 5 sessions because I've recommended family therapy to people.
Mhm.
They might have a session and they're like, "We had a session, it's great, we're good." But
Okay.
then those same issues still arise, they still, kind of creep up, and they haven't
Yeah.
really fully worked through them. So do you feel like when you're recommending therapy to someone, more than one session should be the recommendation?
Well, I'm gonna say more than one session should be the recommendation for anything you're going to therapy. I
For
mean, if you're going to
anything?
therapy and you only go one time.
Okay.
Now let me add this though. I will say there's several things to therapy. One, you have to be open to therapy for it to work. Therapy works if you work it. I will say
Right.
too that the therapist, the clinician does make a difference. It's a
Yes.
relationship, and some therapists aren't. There's styles, there's techniques, there's approaches. Some are more introspective, some are more directive. So there's a whole range of the way therapists bring their talents and skills to the table. And
Right.
sometimes that works for the person, sometimes not. But I do think to truly assess what that is and that relationship, I do think at least 3 to 4 is a good flow to know that if there's something happening or not happening, and then getting into the real meat of it. Some people take off running, and
Yeah.
but those are usually people who are really open and they want something out of the process. So, but in particular with family, because family therapy already takes longer usually because you have more people who you're trying to give a
Yeah, the
voice to
dynamic.
in the session. If I have an individual client, every session is theirs. They may talk
Yeah.
about different things and focus on different things, but that's
But
not the case with
everything's
family
them.
therapy. Mhm.
Right.
Family therapy, you have to navigate giving everybody a voice and you have to model what that looks like because a lot of times that's the issue. Everybody doesn't have a voice, but in therapy,
Yeah.
everybody has a voice in here. And that takes a while to really get established.
Okay, so everyone watching, I asked that question specifically so everyone can understand there is benefit to not just going to therapy one time, but continuing in therapy. There is benefit to more than one session if anyone is interested in going to therapy. I do see a question in the chat. It says, are there new or unique behaviors related to blended families currently that weren't experienced in the past?
New or unique behaviors. Currently, I can't really say if I've identified any new or unique behaviors currently. I will add this though. I do think we're in a generation now where young people have more of a voice and feel a lot more comfortable exercising their voice.
Oh,
So what
yeah.
I think, yeah,
Maybe too much.
you probably see where I'm going with this. Um,
Yeah.
but I really think it's not a bad thing. I know a lot of parents struggle with it because sometimes it can come off as being smart or having too much mouth or you're,
Mhm.
sassing me, all these things. But I do think what I do notice in blended families is that if somebody has a problem or a child has a problem or a teenager, they'll tell you. And it used to be
Right.
a time where younger people didn't feel like they had a voice. It didn't really feel safe. Children are seen and not heard. That's
Have to
more of a
drag it out
generation.
of him.
And that's if you got it
Yeah.
because it was already made clear it's not safe for me to express. I can't
Express
not
that.
like something that's going to look like it goes against my dad or my mom because that may have some consequence on me. So that
Okay.
is something I have noticed generationally, and sometimes that causes an issue. When you have more vocal children,
Mm.
you have more reactions to that, and then that can cause sometimes a lot more arguments. Whereas once upon a time, children probably had the same issue, same concerns, but they just didn't voice them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I love that. Hopefully that answered your question. Let's see. Another one is, can you say anything to convince a black man or any man that therapy is needed?
Um, well, I guess I would just say it's needed.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
I
yeah.
know. Well, let me say this personally. In my office, I have another therapist of color, Mr. Adrian Bennett. He's great, um, and I refer men to him sometimes, just because sometimes I feel like
Okay.
it. I can kind of hear the presenting issue and kind of see if it's a good referral. But I have quite a few men of color on my caseload, and they want to come to me.
Oh,
And,
wow.
like, I'll try to refer to a male because I think, like, "Well, you know what? I think this ther" I mean, Mr. Bennett's within my office, but I have other male clinicians
Yeah.
I'll refer to for different reasons. And they'll say they wanna come to me, and they'll come, and they'll talk, and you can just see this release of having a safe space where they can talk to somebody in a non-judgmental space. And usually it's pretty consistent, oftentimes, of just feeling like I have all these things I deal with. I know I'm
Yeah.
frustrated, I'm angry, but I don't always feel safe communicating because men aren't supposed to feel this or aren't supposed to say these things or aren't, so it comes off rude.
Right.
And in my space, just being able to convey or communicate to them like, no, what you're feeling like that would frustrate me. Like, wow, like, so what are we going to do
Yeah.
about this? And so I do think the world historically and maybe even currently has responded to men differently when it comes to using their voice in ways of saying that I'm hurting.
Right.
And I
Right.
do see a lot more men nowadays coming to therapy, not just to me, to other clinicians I know, men of color going and that's being, and I'm talking about coming consistently, like not missing sessions,
Yeah.
no shows, and so they come to those appointments, and I think because it feels good to have a place where you can use your voice, but also leave with kind of like, okay, let me try this, let me see if
Have
this
a
thing she's
plan.
talking about really works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I love that. I love that. And we're almost at the hour. Oh gosh, I'm trying to see if there's
Okay.
any more questions in the chat
Mhm.
before we let you go. Did see another one. Um blah blah blah. Okay, I can't find it. If you have
Okay.
questions, everybody put them in the chat right now so I can go ahead and see them because there's too many in the comments right now. But I'm really happy that I got to speak to you and talk to you specifically about, my situation.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like there's a lot of people that have watched my channel and they can relate to me. A lot of things that I've said have resonated with them. And then them trying to make that decision of whether or not, hey, does this serve me? Does this benefit me in my life, this
Yeah.
relationship?
Mhm.
And trying to figure out how to navigate that and what to do with it and where to go from it. I feel like hearing from a therapist of 20 plus years guys here
Yeah.
that we're speaking with say
Mhm.
that boundaries are huge, and it is okay, 100% okay, if you move forward in life and leave family members behind, love them from afar, and that is
Yeah.
okay, and that is something
Yeah.
that is healthy to do if if it applies to the boundaries that you're setting in your life with your family.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy I got to ask you those questions, and hopefully the people who needed to hear that got to hear that, and maybe that gives them some courage. And also, how necessary therapy is for everything, not just blended families, not just relationships, but just how necessary therapy is for introspection, trying to understand who you are as a person, break down things. That you may not even understand why you feel the way you feel or why you get triggered the way you get triggered. So I really do appreciate you coming on the channel. Is there anything that you want to leave anybody with in regards to blended families, therapy, all of
Um,
that?
well, I know blended families get so layered with, but if somebody ever has any specific questions they want to email me, I think I saw somebody about you have my email and everything. I'm more than happy to
Yes.
answer, or on social media. I'm on social media. Um, I would say that as far as therapy in general, then if it's something that's stressful to you or something that's impacting your life in any way, and you feel like you've tried it enough on your own, it's just not working, then I'm definitely going to recommend try therapy. Just give it a try, and
Yeah.
I will say the thing about therapy, every therapist, I get people sometimes where who they come back to therapy, but they didn't start with me. They may say, I tried the therapist for it, didn't work. I didn't really like this. That happens, so
Yeah.
it's like relationships. People may say, we don't say, oh, I'm never going to date again. You may say it, but you end up dating again. With therapists, even though I know it's hard, it's kind of the same way. Give them a chance. Give them a chance if you feel like it's not working. I will say for people, I think there was a question about therapists from the same community. I don't know if that was referring to race or ethnicity.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
if there's certain, I think if there's certain cultural issues that are coming up, then definitely. But even then, you have to research. I'm considered a woman of color, but that doesn't mean I automatically relate to certain, you know, cultures
Yeah.
or people of color. So it really depends on the cultural
Right.
issues. Something else to tell people, as far as therapists of color, we only make up like 2% of the mental health
Woo!
providers. So that whole
Wow.
supply demand. So if you're dealing with depression, there's a lot of skilled clinicians who can help you treat your depression who are not of color. So I think
Mm.
when you're talking about things like that, the race, the ethnicity, it just really depends on the other variables that's part of your presenting issue and your comfort. Some
Okay.
people just more comfortable. Some people are more comfortable just sitting with somebody who looks like them, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I understand that as well. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And there's another question. Should you and your spouse have the same therapist? My spouse and I, we do not have the same therapist. We have the same, well, obviously, we have a marriage therapist. We have our individual therapists.
Right.
So should your spouse have the same therapist as you? Do you feel like that's okay?
I don't know if it's a matter of okay or not. I wouldn't, as a clinician, I don't consider it a good practice.
Right.
So I've worked with couples who wanted to see me individually, and I've had couples
Okay.
that I've seen as a couple, and I've scheduled individual sessions with them, and they know
Okay.
about it as part of their couples therapy. Then we come back. But if you're talking
Okay.
about both of you having a therapist, no, I don't think it's a good practice. It's hard to keep that separate when yeah. So,
Okay, I 100% agree. I didn't want my husband to
mhm,
have the same therapist as me at all. It's like go find your
yeah.
own. It takes a lot of time. Just like you said, like I've gone through so many therapists. It's not even funny. Something I always try and tell people when they decide, okay, I'm gonna try therapy. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
get ready because your first therapist may not be the one, and your second
Yeah.
one may not be the one, or your third one. It
Mhm.
is a journey. You have to do the work to find a therapist that works for you, that challenges you, that understands
Yeah.
you, that sees you, that advocates for you. And it may not just happen from your first therapist. You might get lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe you
Yeah.
will, but sometimes it takes trial and error a few times to find a good
Yeah.
therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that helps anyone out there listening, because I do feel like as a culture, it's so easy now. If anybody's going through anything, or if anybody's showing any type of emotion, the go-to
Mhm.
statement is, "Oh, you need therapy," and it's like,
Mhm.
and then, and then when that person maybe gets the courage to, okay, I'll go to therapy. If they don't have a good first session, they're like, yeah, I don't know why people do this. This was dumb.
Yeah.
I don't want to try it. Well,
Yeah.
it might just be the therapist that you had. You have to do the work to
Mhm.
get to your better self, to find the best therapist for you. So hopefully that
Mhm.
helps somebody.
Mhm. Yeah.
And is there anything else you want to add, Dr. Bean?
No, no, not tonight. I would say if you need a part 2 or anything else come up, I love talking about it, family dynamics, all of that. Because I know it's so much to wrap up in an hour, but you just let me
It's
know,
it's
and,
it's a lot, and everyone who
yeah,
watches me knows I am so kinda disjointed. I've got to work on that. I think it's my ADHD. So
I thought it was great. It was helpful. It was helpful.
Okay, well,
You did great, yeah.
good, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
If anybody wants a part two, everybody, you know how to reach me on my channel, and then I'll see if we can get Dr. Bean back. But we greatly, greatly appreciate you. I do have a mod in the channel that has dropped um, her Instagram. If anybody wants to go and become a friend and follow her on Instagram, if you want
Um
to say it right now, what is it called? Is it Doc Keisha?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
on Instagram, and also have Doc Keisha Wellness on Facebook. I will be honest, I'm not the best at keeping social media and everything current, but I do have a page. So, and if you
Yeah.
reach out to me, I'll check it. But some people are just great at that, like keeping stuff and day to day
Oh,
stuff. That's
that's my
not me, but
sister. Yeah.
yeah. So, but I have it. So I'm thank you for whoever shared it. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And we're both in
Okay.
Nashville. Hopefully, the weather gets better for us, but
Awesome.
we'll see.
Awesome. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much.
Have a
Bye,
have a
everyone.
good one.
Bye.